President Obama just wrapped up his first news conference since Donald Trump became president-elect, and the outgoing commander-in-chief had a lot of useful advice for the incoming commander-in-chief, ranging topics crucial like details surrounding our nuclear responses, NATO, and job creation. And then Mr. Obama got into some of the politics, too, making recommendations about carbon emissions, wind and solar power, and the minimum wage. The president began by telling Democrats to basically get over it. Trump won. Blame yourselves for your loss.
The people have spoken. Donald Trump will be the next president, the 45th president of the United States. Those who didn't vote for him have to recognize that that's how democracy works. When I won, there were a number of people who didn't like me and didn't like what I stood for. I think that whenever you've got an incoming president of the other side, particularly in a bitter election like this, it takes a while for people to reconcile themselves with that new reality.
And the mainstream media hasn't come to terms with the people's decision. Here was ABC's Martha Raddatz's line of questioning.
Does anything concern you about a Trump presidency?
Do I have concerns? Absolutely. Of course I've got concerns. You know, he and I differ on a whole bunch of issues. But you know, the federal government and our democracy is not a speedboat. It's an ocean liner.
Do you still have any concern about his temperament?
There are going to be certain elements of his temperament that will not serve him well unless he recognizes them and corrects them.
All right, KG, I was going to say the president looked relaxed, and he should. He's a lame duck president. But I want to stay on that for a second. Martha Raddatz, after she didn't get the answer she was looking for the first time, she said, but aren't you really concerned about Trump being president? Come on, aren't you?
Yeah, she kept trying to, like, poke the cage, but he wasn't going to take the bait. But he did sound somewhat subdued and not his usual, you know, boisterous, ebullient self. And I think it's probably hitting him that, in fact, now his legacy is going to be on the line because there are no guarantees. He tried to hand over the reins to Hillary Clinton. He made his best effort, put it forward, and so did his wife, the First Lady, and it fell short.
Mm-hmm. Melissa, I heard you kind of whispering during that first soundbite, talking about, you know, Obama basically said, hey, Democrats, you lost this. It's on you, but you think it was
I think it was a little more specific than that. I mean, he started out with this idea because of the changing demographics in the country, and I thought, oh gosh, here we go, you know, with the Electoral College. He said, you got to be everywhere. The reason why I won Iowa twice is because I was there 287 times, and he said, you got to keep campaigning, you got to go everywhere. And I was like, wow, he's basically saying that she didn't try hard enough, that she didn't campaign hard enough. I mean, is the argument that the Trump campaign that we heard, you know, wasn't organized and they didn't have any ground game, was more organized than the Clinton machine? That's what it sounded like.
Or was the message also flawed, too? As Melissa points out, maybe Donald Trump did hit the Midwest a little bit harder than she did, and maybe she lost because of it. But what about the message?
I thought that President Obama was terrific. I thought his tone was very conciliatory. He mentioned the bitterness and ferocity of the campaign, and yet juxtaposed it with the cordiality of the meeting he had with the president-elect. He was very respectful to Donald Trump and to the American people's decision. He mobilized Donald Trump, a ton of Americans, and I think President Obama recognized that there is a movement that has taken place, and you have to deal with it.
Brian, he threw in politics. He threw, what is it, the advice you have for the incoming president? He went through NATO, he went through nuclear responses, and then he started with the carbon footprints and the emissions and wind and solar power, and then he went to minimum wage. These are hardcore Democrat issues.
Yeah, at first he said, yeah, before you unwind Paris, keep in mind, and then fill in the blank. First of all, that wasn't a reprimand on Melissa for her whispering during the soundbite. No, I just want to make that clear. So Melissa, do not feel bad.
I was a little worried.
Because I took it wrong, too, for a while.
Thank you.
Now I'm over it. But I do tell you this. I agree with Geraldo. I loved his tone today. I love the fact that he went out of his way to not insult anything that I could tell of anyone except Hillary Clinton. Because when he said you didn't go, he goes, I had to go to the fish fries and I had to go here and I had to go there.
Right.
The problem is, and I see what you're saying, he did insert politics to a degree, but you know what he's doing? And I know you know this, Eric. He said it. He told you what he's doing. He says he's not someone who's got, he's not an ideologue. He's not dug in on policies. We think he's more pragmatic than that. He's saying that he might be pliable. he might be somebody that when he calls me up, I could try to get him to, I could win him over to a degree. So if he alienates him now and said, this guy's a joke.
He being Trump.
Being Trump.
Yeah.
But I will say this, I think, you know, he went out of his way, I thought, to do things that he hasn't done in the past. He told in Japan, he says he's afraid that, you know, Trump does not have the knowledge of Europe, Asia, and the Middle East. He went out of his way. He thinks he's woefully unprepared, he said in Singapore. And that is why so many people around the world are saying, wow, the current president thinks this nominee is unprepared. What are we in for?
And, KG, he did take another, I would call a bit of a shot, and when he said that, you know, interesting sound bites or provocative sound bites don't necessarily turn into good policy.
Okay, yeah. I mean, it's a veiled, shot, but we can figure it out. We got the decoder. So he's saying, listen, it sounded good. Let's see if these are actually policies that can be implemented that are going to bring about the change that has been promised in this election by the President-elect Donald Trump. Nevertheless, tread carefully, because this is the man that's holding your legacy in his hands. I mean, to be honest, right? I mean, and President Obama is very
that's what played into the why he's not insulting him and going out of his way?
Exactly, because he doesn't want. He wants there not to be, Obamacare repealed and replaced, and the whole thing about leaving two aspects of it in, but the Republicans were going to do that anyway. He's worried about giving all of these different things that he's done, all of the executive orders. I mean, it's like Donald Trump's a big thing of like, liquid paper and just going to erase what he did.
Doing this
Magic marker eraser.
On the eve of going on this tour around the world where he's supposed to be reassuring people that President Trump isn't anything to be afraid of, I don't think that's what Trump wants. I mean, he wants people off balance. It's like a new boss coming into a company. You're saying, you know what, guess what? Everybody be on notice. There's a new boss
I think you're burying the lead, though. The lead, to me, is the fact that President Obama praised President-elect Trump's powerful connection with the majority of the American people.
Yeah, he said
at least the majority of the American people in the electoral.
He was impressed with his victory.
He was very impressed with his victory.
Hard not
he was
to be,
impressed with the job that Trump did, this historic job in getting this powerful connection. Those are powerful words.
This is the guy who, about 10 days or so ago, said Donald Trump is unfit to hold the president.
15 days ago, Donald Trump said he was born in Kenya.
Well, I'm not sure about that. At one point, he did say, this isn't constitutional. This transition of power isn't in the Constitution, but we do.
You mean the cordiality?
Well, that the outgoing president takes the time and gets the incoming president, commander-in-chief, up to speed on things like NATO.
It's not mandated.
You know what? I love the fact that President Bush set the template for this. He refers to President Bush all the time.
Which I like.
Because he's the guy who became president by insulting President Bush's Iraq war. And when they finally met, you thought there'd be tension. Bush was above it, Bush 43, and he's been above it for 8 years since. And he keeps saying the standards set by President Bush during that transition is something I look to emulate. It's really hard to shake it because he's in his 50s. He's got 30 more years to look back at his legacy, and this transition has a lot to do with his legacy.
But his legacy is about to be dismantled. I mean, over the next 2 to 4 years, what will remain?
Well, take Obamacare.
Hold on.
Take Obamacare.
Are you going to take away? Just hold that for hold Obamacare for 1 second. Give me another legacy item. Everything else is by executive fiat. Donald Trump said the first thing he's going to do is dismantle all the executive orders.
If President
Climate
Trump,
change.
it was climate change also. It was flooded in Miami Beach, if anyone noticed yesterday.
Because that is not proven to be climate change.
Yeah, right. It's
I was being facetious.
It's the super duper moon. Actually, my cab driver today told me a great thing. He said, "You know what the super moon was? That was Donald Trump for the Democrats giving them a super moon." But I think that when you consider...
I just got that.
It took me a while. Right? Immigration.
So I take
President Obama pleaded with President-elect Trump today not to throw out the DREAM Act students. The students who've been given this temporary deferral from deportation because they were brought here as small children, have committed no crimes. They are basically American children. What President Obama was doing to me today was pleading with President Trump.
No,
please,
I totally
sir.
disagree.
Okay.
I totally disagree. When he made that one point, he said, I think that you find when I turn over the keys that the car is in pretty good shape. I think he was out there making the case for for his legacy. I mean, he went through thing after thing. He said, when I inherited the presidency, everything was falling apart. The wheels were coming off. The economy was in shambles. scramble.
all true.
And he went on and he tried to talk about how, yeah, I know people aren't totally happy with what's going on, but we still did a great job. And he's going back and forth between trying to recognize that there's a huge portion of Americans, like you said, who are very unhappy with what's going on, and they all came out to vote, but at the same time arguing why his presidency was in fact great, and we should be looking back at it and saying he did a great job, when in fact the electorate just said, no, you didn't.
He also said no major scandals. He also said
That
no
was
major
true,
scandals that happened. I mean, people look at him and they don't look at him as fundamentally dishonest, but they do look at the IRS. They do look at a lot of different things that happened during that time where there was no hell to pay for it. And then people, and also he brought up the VA, which I think is a dangerous thing for him to bring up. He says, look, we have so many people. Yeah, we had a problem in Phoenix, but we have so many other people. It happens. That's a tough thing to reconcile.
We got to tease KG, though. He's going to have a pile of executive orders this high in his desk, Donald Trump will, day one, to start repealing every single, dismantling every one of them. I think he'll do it right away.
It's a lot to go through, and I think that's something, and he's really talked about government waste and overregulation and, you know, the power of the executive pen being, you know, misused and abused, essentially, during this past 8 years of the administration. So, I don't know.